Good afternoon. We're here today in the Yes Cafe in Edinburgh South with some of the members from Scots Asians for Indy. We're just going to have a chat this afternoon about the follow-on from the referendum and some of the issues ahead of the Westminster general election in May. So my name is Sohail Haque. I'm the Edinburgh South candidate for the SNP. Without further ado, we'll just go round the table and have some introductions.
My name is Sohail Haque. I'm a former campaigner for the Labour for Independence group, funded by Alan Grogan. I'm also a member of the Labour Party as well. I've been campaigning on and off for I think the last 10 years, involved with anti-fascist and anti-racist groups and the anti-war movement as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nighet Riaz. I'm one of the facilitators for Scots Asians for Yes, a campaign group that was set up along with Yes Scotland. I've been a member of the Scottish National Party for nearly 4 years. In my other life, I am a PhD doctoral researcher looking at equalities and young people in schools and communities.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Moni Tagore. I'm a member of the Scottish National Party, like Nighet. Also got involved heavily with the Scots Asians network that Nighet's part of during the referendum. I wasn't terribly involved in politics before, but when the referendum came up, I really did move up into fifth gear and have been there ever since.
Good stuff, thank you. I think probably a good place to start is an article, second recent occurrence that's in the paper today with regard a form of defection to Labour. So having read the story this morning, what thoughts do you have on today's occurrences?
Well, to be honest, after the last one, I did think that we'd see something like this again. I think there may be more to come. I think that this has been, how do you say this tactfully? I mean, there's a bit of playing politics here, isn't there? I mean, this, if I understand it correctly, this gentleman used to be part of the Labour Party, and then he went to the SNP in 2012?
No, he wanted to be nominated as a councillor for Govan. He didn't get the support of the branch, and shortly afterwards there was the vote for NATO at conference. He used that opportunity to jump back to Labour and then denounce the Scottish National Party. It just seemed very, interesting, the timing to make a point.
The stance that was taken then around the NATO issue. I mean, he left the SNP to go back to Labour at that point. On what grounds?
I think again he just he felt there was a lot of racism in the Scottish National Party among the activists. There's a group of men, 50 years and above, who feel from the Asian subcontinent, who've lived here, who've worked here, who have contributed to society. I will give them that, and they have worked hard to gain that political voice. But there is that sense of entitlement that they should be rewarded for their services to politics, regardless of what party they belong to. And they seem to pick and choose. If they're not successful in one, they will transfer to another. It's a pattern I've seen, and I don't know if Sohail or Moni have observed the same sort of patterns.
I think I'm trying to look at it from a political perspective. I'm a former student of international relations, and I think these scaremongering stories tend to pop out all too conveniently. I think one thing that's apparent, the bloc minority vote, or the BME vote, has switched, and obviously Mr Blair has done a service for that, for the SNP, and it's because of that we've seen a huge migration, minority, I think, switch to the SNP, not just on the issue of Iraq, but issue of immigration and so forth, which we'll touch on later on. That's the key issue here, and that's the key issue that Labour is having to reconcile over and over again. that that it's lost its vote. It's people are switching to the SNP because they're no longer just a nationalist party, and they're a multifaceted party that's considered they're interested in more than just the national interest of Scotland, but everyone in Scotland. I think that's the biggest issue at crux, and I think what Nick has mentioned is really to the heart of it. There have been individuals who've been for a long time. Traditionally, BME communities attract themselves to the Labour Party. The Labour Party was, say, founding fathers or multiculturalism, the party that pushed it forward. And so they've seen a allegiance with that party, and over the decades, I'd say maybe starting about Neil Kinnock and then Mr Blair, you've seen that drift away. And now there's a reality that they can't get with one party. They might want to go back to the Labour Party, and I think that's about I'd say bona fide opportunism, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Obviously, the individuals I don't personally know, but the explanation you're giving me there certainly sounds like career advancement, perhaps over.
I think he made over principle, basically. But he made Mr. Shoaib in an article a couple of weeks ago. He said that when he was phoning up SNP members, that he felt that he received a lot of racism because they asked him to repeat his name several times. It could be that he wasn't communicating in a manner that other people could understand, rather than terming it as a discriminatory behaviour. So rather than jumping from to blaming everyone for him not getting that opportunity to represent that area, perhaps he should have used that time to figure out how he could have been communicating more effectively.
That seems to make sense.
Yeah, and I think we have to ask ourselves as SNP members if we're going to take lectures on racism from a party that recently just put out a mug with a rather distasteful slogan on the side. Was it controls on immigration?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that you would expect from a far right party. That's the sort of thing I would expect from UKIP or the British National Party, not a supposed left of centre mainstream party that's welcoming immigrants.
And the background to the mug was that there's a series of mugs issued that were key principles, key policies, or is that the idea that was behind the Labour Party with the mug? Was that
From what I gather, and so not being an SNP member and not being a Labour Party anymore, which is probably convenient now. Key policies to highlight what Labour stands for, and obviously economy and immigration being one of them, and to show that Labour isn't shy away from the issue. Putting on a mug is pretty distasteful, to be quite frank.
Yeah, it's also a slight shift. I mean, it was fairly widely accepted and established in the referendum that Scotland has a need for positive immigration into the country as well. So it's quite specifically not in Scotland's interest to pursue such a policy to that extent, and rather, like we called it, distasteful would be just about sum it up.
I think it's actually quite frightening that Labour, which used to stand for the working class population, is now feeding into the anti-immigration sort of like rhetoric, and also the far right politics that are being deployed by UKIP. Is that a reflection of society? Is this a reflection of how media want to portray the working class and turn them against the immigrants or the incomers into this country who have contributed to society, which has been evidenced?
Yeah, I've obviously done so many doors in this campaign, speaking to people, and I can genuinely say not once has a question or a point been raised that we think we have too many foreigners, we think we have too many people coming into the country. Not once. I mean, in parlance, maybe in a cafe or something like that, somebody will say their nephew can't get a job because everybody in that place is Polish or something like that. But then when you actually go into that conversation, That's not predominantly the issue, that's just somebody's got something to say. Unsubstantiated really, and I suspect some of this is the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have to remember about immigrants is that just as many, I think it's almost just as many Scottish people leave the country every year. So we need a certain level of immigration into Scotland. It's vital for the economy.
Well, there's two bits again in the information that we looked at that we were promoting last year. It was positive immigration takes in both those elements. It's about creating a society and creating jobs and opportunity and availability where not so many young people have to leave to pursue what they want to do. That in itself creates positive immigration. The same amount of people can be coming, but if less people are leaving because we have the opportunities here.
See, that's part and parcel. They kind of see it as an ad campaign to present immigration as a positive factor, and it's led by people in Scotland. The campaign to put immigration on a monk isn't aimed at people in Scotland. It's aimed at the rest of the UK, the votes that the Labour Party want, which is the fundamental reason why that when I campaigned with Labour for Independence, was that Labour in Scotland was marginalised. It was just put to the back burner. Of course, Joanne Lamont did it as a service and confirmed that before she left. And that's the fundamental reason, is that every policy, every direction, the Scots are being left to the side, and it's the interest of those south of the border and the rest of the UK that we put forward. And it may be a concern, and in fact, if you look at the areas around the UK where immigration is supposedly an issue, you'll be bewildered to find that actually most of these areas where people have a problem with immigrants, hardly any immigrants actually reside in these areas, so they're actually all white areas. So that tells you that the popularity, the issue with immigration is actually only in areas where there's no immigrants.
Right.
You would think that London and really high metropolitan areas would have huge issues with immigration. No, it's actually the opposite. So Labour is going for those votes. They're going for the prosperous areas, the middle class. And just recently, you'll hear the headline where Mr. Miliband is appealing to moderate Tories. I would thought I'd never hear that line, and that tells you how far the Labour Party
have moved over to the right.
This idea of being centre left, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The Labour Party have been a centre right wing party for a very long time. And I think that the only people that can't grasp that are the core Labour voters who are genuine but believe that the party will somehow turn around and be the party that was 100 years ago.
That's an interesting point, because my own personal view is that the thing that terrifies the Labour leadership about this election is that they're going to be exposed. They rely on the perception by the man on the ground that they are a left-wing party still, when the Labour leadership clearly are not. They're centre-right neoliberalists. If they're in a position where they're leading a minority government, they'll be able to push through right-wing measures and rely on Tory votes, or they can go left-wing and rely on, hopefully, a large block of SNP MPs. And they'll have no one to blame for themselves if they choose to push through right-wing measures. So hence what I'm saying, they'll be exposed politically for what they are. And I think that's the thing that terrifies them the most.
I agree with that. I also, bringing it back to the Scottish context, and even back to Glasgow, campaigning during the referendum, the last 10 days when the Better Together campaign realised, that we had a real chance of winning the referendum, they brought in a cohort of the ethnic minority Asian, the Asian Better Together Labour lot, and they went from door to door, from shop to shop, intimidating and bullying the shop owners, the housewives, and telling them that their passports would be taken off them, they would be stuck on a plane and sent back home if they voted yes.
Even though this is their home.
This is their home. And to see them doing that horrified me. People ended up, spent a year and a half building up trust and rapport, and in those 10 days they completely scared these people so much that they didn't know how to vote. I mean, we had to go back and work very hard, And I'm delighted to say, as a campaign, we got 64% of the ethnic minorities to vote yes. But still, it's the 36 that didn't. That, you know, we feel we let them down. We let fear win. We're not going to let that happen this time. And the SNP are targeting all the same groups, and this, you know, to how would you say it, to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I had a similar story to Nighet's towards the last week of the referendum. Certain Labour MP and his wife attended one of the mosques in Edinburgh and proceeded to put the fear of God into the people who were attending the mosque, to the point where the imam requested someone from our side go in and talk to these people who'd been scared out of their minds, because although he wasn't necessarily on side, he knew that they had been lied to, and it was, you know, too much for him. You know,
it was the levels of intimidation.
Yeah,
it was horrifying to observe.
Absolutely disgraceful that you're resorting to intimidating, you know, elderly women, that they're going to be put on a plane back to the Indian subcontinent.
And because these stories had happened in, like, Africa, I think from Uganda, it was very easy for them to sort of like awaken those kind of fears, and, you know, to bring all that historical angst of being, you know, removed from one country and having to make their home somewhere else again.
Yeah.
There was no need for that. The Labour Party is supposed to be the party that encourages multiculturalism, encourages diversity.
Yeah.
That is the reason for the ethnic minority shift. They've seen firsthand that the Labour Party just stands for itself. It doesn't care about anybody, not the working class, not the ethnic minorities that come here. It's just about them getting into power and then doing what they like for if it's 5 years or 10 years. The mindset has changed now.
Okay. From there, if we have a bit of a chat about how you came to the current position of your political beliefs, like maybe where your ideology began in the first instance, and how you've that progress and that travel has happened.
I think I've been political since I was 16 years old. Putting aside my academic background, I think what culminated it was probably in the Iraq War. I think not just the Iraq War, but it was the election of the Labour Party after such a notable period of Tory rule. And what you saw was a glimmer of hope, not just among centrists, but on those on the left, the trade union movement, and even on the far left, if I want to call them far left, and there's no such thing as, and certainly in Scotland anyway. There was a sense of joyous hope that there was something different now. Blair was certainly an unknown figure. He'd been an MP for a while, but I think the reality started to come to fruition when Labour completely abandoned everything. The removal of Clause 4, you know, and the somewhat, you know, token gesture that we're now a democratic socialist party. I think we'd put a guess that the socialist element was removed from the actual constitution. That was a change, but Iraq changed me. Iraq, I became an anti-war campaigner with Stop War Coalition, and I think it's one of the largest anti-war movements literally in Europe. I don't think there's anything that goes far back, right back to the Vietnam protests, and through there I became active on the left, non-affiliated to any party. I didn't join the Labour Party later on, and I still had reservations at the Labour Party. The Labour Party has really, really amazing figures. You know, just recently we've still got people like Dennis Skinner and Jeremy Corbyn. You've still got in late Tony Benn. I'm a Bennite. I'm not a Blairite. I'm a Bennite. And these people are the people that shape the party. But unfortunately, it's just to quote. I'm not going to put them quoting an academic, but the Blairite sharks have now sunk the party completely, and that's the problem. And
do you feel that? I mean, you're naming people there who are at the closing end of maybe their political careers.
Yeah.
Do you feel anywhere within the Labour Party just now there's an undercurrent coming of talented politicians that might move the Labour Party back towards some of those previous beliefs, or do you feel that it's just completely lost now and irrecoverable?
Quite openly, no, not at all. It's just in Scotland, the Labour Party has huge problems. Namely, that every activist, young, enthusiastic person isn't involved with the party, so it's got huge membership issues. We don't need to. That's a common knowledge. South of the border, the ethos is the Blair ethos. It isn't the ethos of Skinner or Ben, that or Michael Foot. That's gone now. So we're talking the people who get into the Labour Party are because they want a career in the Labour Party. It isn't about being a champion for rights or for workers or against racism. So it no longer has those deep-rooted values that once about justice and fairness that the Labour Party was founded on.
So when you're speaking about the volunteers the Labour Party have just now, and I think you said there that they wouldn't be within the membership of the Labour Party, so when we come to campaign time and there are the folk out on the doors and doing some of the grass work for Labour, where are those people coming from?
No, there'll be Labour Party members. It just doesn't have the members that the other parties
the membership
have.
total,
yeah,
you mean?
it's literally been decimated in Scotland.
Right.
And so it doesn't have that young, vibrant, youth that's needed to inject new ideas and put you in a progressive direction. Look at the radical independence campaign. It's come out of nowhere, and it's literally like a mountain with flowers coming out of it.
Yeah.
These are the people that ideally would have been in the Labour Party. They are
30 years, 30, 40 years ago,
exactly.
They would have been, yeah.
They would have been the foot soldiers of today's and the generals of the Labour Party. But because the Labour Party has taken a different trajectory, these people have taken their matters in their own hands and set up their own job. So that's the problem, is that they've disassociated and they've cut off their own existence. It's like, I think we say that the Labour Party is facing an existential threat in Scotland, where it's going to be completely obliterated. And it's quite saddening because it's founded in Scotland. It has deep roots within Scotland. Yeah. I'm Labour in a sense, not tribally. I think it's my values. So whether I'm in the party or not, I believe that my values are international. And they can be adopted by anybody. I don't need a Labour card to tell me I'm a Labour person. And I think this was the issue, that Labour Party have become a party of identity and cards, and they left the values to the wayside.
Nighet, how did you get to here?
I joined the SNP 4 years ago. My story is very, very different from others. I was awarded a PhD studentship, and during one of my first meetings with my supervisors, he asked me what my political background was, and I quite openly said I don't believe in politics. They always, it's always about their agendas. It's not about people on the ground. But he insisted I go and stand at a demonstration, learn more about what my ideology was, where I came from. And previously to that, I was a businesswoman, working with my husband in sort of like restaurants and commodities and trading, etc. So I lived in my little bubble, had my children, they grew up, and when I went back into education, it was a very different world that opened up to me. When I did start looking at politics, I looked at all the ideologies, and the one that fitted was the SNP. I got involved very quickly, and it was at the start of the council elections, right. And it was the canvassing. It was going around from door to door, listening to people's stories, people opening up and telling you, what is wrong and what is happening. They talked a lot about potholes and councils not doing what they were promised to do, and that came more and more, again, a pattern of like people not being satisfied. And the European elections came up after that. I got very involved with the canvassing for that, and then Scots Asians for Yes was set up by Yes Scotland, and that was when I think a group of us just sort of like went, we have a very important role to play to encourage people from ethnic minority communities all across Scotland to have that voice. Because having found mine and realising that we could play a role, I wanted everybody else to feel that same kind of like ownership. Post-referendum, the Westminster elections came up, and it was, again, we were encouraged by the SNP Women's Officer to get more women trained up and to apply to be on the vetting list, on the approved vetting list, and to put themselves forward. And as I was the Women's Officer for SNP, the Pollock-Shields branch, I was encouraged to go through that process. I got myself on the approved list. I got another female member on the council list as well. So that was step one. And then I was said, well, push yourself forward. You can get yourself nominated in various seats. You don't need to stick to one. You need to go out and you know, it's about breaking stereotypes. It's about being seen. And you know, so I went and got myself nominated in 5 areas. There were gasps of horror when I related that story, thinking, she must be power hungry. No, that was not the point. The point was, it was about breaking down stereotypes, because the kind of Asians that had been promoted in the SNP to that date were the Asian men like Mr. Muhammad Shoaib and Mr. Adil Bhatti, that actually couldn't, that did have communication problems. And I wanted to say, no, we have people like Amr Anwar, who's a lawyer, we have people like Moni Tagore, who's has a financial background, you know, but it was getting these people to come forward and to encourage them that I went and stood in various places. Like, if I can stand, what's stopping other people, you know, and sharing this journey like I'm doing with you today. What was very interesting and very humbling was that I came second in place to Alison Thewlis in Glasgow's central seat, and I find it incredibly amusing that, you know, in papers have continuously said that Alison was, you know, Mr. Shoaib was pipped to the seat by Alison Thewlis. He was way down that list. There were 7 or 8 of us that stood, and I would like to say he was number 6.
Right.
Yes.
Well, not quite pipped. Not
quite pipped at all. So I mean, it's really, these kind of stories need to be nipped in the bud, and the reality should be out there. But you know, my only one concern is make it more transparent, so people can't use these opportunities to create myths of racism or discrimination. You know, so we can deal with it right there at the point of origin. Yeah. So I've absolutely loved my journey. And hopefully, you know, now that I know how the process works, I might go for Holyrood. Right. Yeah.
Well, I have a funny feeling that journey might not be at a close yet, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Thank you.
Moni?
Yeah, like Nighet, I didn't have any politics until I was about 22, and I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I just started taking an interest. I started buying books, educating myself, and finding I was enjoying reading about the world and what goes on and how it's run. And similar to Sohail, when the Iraq War happened, you know, just instinct, if nothing else, told me, no, this is wrong. You know, this is a step too far. You know, this was, it was just horrible. You know, it was disgraceful, and it's Blair's legacy now, isn't it? And from there, I just you know, delved further and further into it, and I realised what I was against, the neoliberalism that was rising around us, but I still hadn't figured out what I was for. Yeah. And so, you know, I started researching more and more, and I realised that I would probably be classed as a social democrat, you know, and I was a fan of the Scandinavian Norwegian model of doing things, and it seemed to me that this made sense. It worked. It works really well. I'm rather embarrassed to admit I voted Liberal Democrat when I was 23, purely on their opposition to the Iraq War. But
well, that's harsh on yourself, because back then, you know, the Liberal Democrat Party wasn't what we've seen it become in the last 5 years.
Yes.
So you maybe needn't beat yourself up quite so much about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. I think when I was 25, I realised I was what would be termed as a Scottish nationalist, and I just liked what I was hearing from the party. I mean, you know, they consistently defended immigration. They seemed to say the right things on public services, the healthcare, how the country should be run. And crucially, I wasn't hearing a sensible explanation of why Scotland couldn't be independent. You know, and the more I looked, it just seemed to be the right thing to do. You know, when you actually delved into the facts and figures. And yeah, so from that point on, I was voting for the SNP, and like Nighet, about 4 or 5 years ago, I took the step of joining the party. And when the referendum happened, I realised that it was time to get up off the couch and start campaigning. And yeah, I've had a really enjoyable time. I don't think I'll ever go back to just being content sitting on the couch. So that was my journey.
Good stuff. It's actually one of my happiest things from the referendum is that I got you into this.
Yes, you did.
I kind of feel a little bit of responsibility there. So the fact that you're engaged and you love it and you still want to pursue that makes me feel a wee bit better that I didn't.
Yes, I think between you and Nighet sort of helped give me that push.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So why you've all moved to one extent or another in political beliefs and affiliations with parties. Why do you think we're seeing so many people who have traditionally voted elsewhere now vote in SNP?
Well, I mean, you know, we've discussed the fact that there's been a lot of nonsense written over the past few weeks about the party, and I don't think any of us doubt that there's going to be more to come as the London media get more shrill and hysterical in their attacks on us. But the facts are this, is that the SNP hold records when it comes to engaging ethnic minorities. You know, Bashar Ahmed was the first ethnic minority MSP for the SNP. Hamza Yusuf is the first ethnic minority to hold a government ministerial post in the Scottish government. He's SNP. And Tasmina is a friend.
It's looking it's looking very, very hopeful that she will be elected as the first SNP female Asian Muslim candidate for Perth and Ochil, and you know, we're really, really delighted that we will have that, and it's happened from the SNP. You know,
this ties in with what I said earlier about you know, as a young man, you know, wasn't tied to any party, wasn't brought up with politics. You know, looking at it objectively, you know, it seemed that this party was saying sensible things when it came to ethnic minorities and engaging with them really well. I've just been made to feel so welcome, and I think the fact is that the type of nationalism that it is it's a civic nationalism. It's not an ethnic nationalism, it's a civic nationalism, and that's important.
Indeed.
I was going to add to that. I mean, there will always be elements within any grouping of undesirables, but in the SNP, that is a very, very tiny majority. And you know, again, like Moni, I've been welcomed with open arms. I've been encouraged, pushed forward. You know, if I didn't have that encouragement, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you so frankly. They've talked about sound bites like the SNP is a social conscience. That relates. That you know, that means a lot to me, and I totally agree. This SNP is now speaking for the people that Labour and other political parties have abandoned. The working class that hasn't been acknowledged for decades, but just been used as part of the propaganda. But with campaigns like Radical Independence, they have helped move them forward. And the next step has been post-referendum, when that segment then went on to join the SNP. As the alternative to Labour.
And look at our, I mean, we mentioned the mugs of Labour, the controls on immigration mugs. I mean, you know, also should point out, to be balanced, the Tories with their vans that they were driving around London, you know, with the message on the side, "Go home." You know, again, the language of the far right.
Which shows that they are becoming a far more discriminatory party than they blame others of being. I mean, the same with the Conservatives. It's like, you know, they're the ones that are spouting this kind of like discriminatory language. They're pathologizing the working class. They're pathologizing the ethnic minorities that come here, that work here, that contribute. You know, we are the backbone of society. You know, take away the doctors, the accountants, the lawyers, you know, the shopkeepers. You know, you'd have to start again.
Sohail, in your journey, obviously, from being a Labour person as opposed to necessarily carrying a card, how do you feel, and what do you feel the reasons fundamentally are for the movement?
Do you know what, I'm going to cite you an actual example. And I remember when I joined the Yes campaign, and I was out campaigning in Dundee, Baxter Park, and I came across a family, like a Muslim family, and they were of English descent. And the conversation I had was really, really enlightening. First, they were quite horrified. One, I was campaigning for a nationalist entity. This is nationalism. Well, and when I started to put forward, I mean, I wasn't there representing the SNP. I was actually, a social background, and laid out that why Scotland, an independent Scotland, a trident free, away from the hawkish foreign policy, and a more, I'd say, multilateral foreign policy. They couldn't comprehend that, because that wasn't the image that was sold to them of nationalist parties. When you mentioned the word nationalist, they always thought of, the BNP, the EDL, the idea of somehow a party linked with race and identity with national politics. And I made it quite clear that the independent Scotland wasn't about that, and as Moni's mentioned, about civic nationalism, everyone working together. If I can use the word solidarity, I think that's probably another way of looking at it. And I think she went away, although she was there only visiting and she wasn't a voter. It's a pity, because I think I probably got a yes voter there. It's this image that's being used to portray anyone that may want to call himself a patriot or a nationalist as a bogeyman. And that's changed among minorities. Minorities no longer see the word nationalist as a dirty word. And that's went through a change over the last decade. And that's why you've seen a movement. But I also see that the actions, and I have to give credit to the SNP now, and it's on film as well. It's the actions of the SNP. The SNP were the only party to condemn Israel for its horrendous bombings, and offered Palestinians respite to come over and get treated. No other party, not even the Labour Party, we wouldn't expect that from the Tories, but we know that anyway. But nobody else, apart from the SNP vocally condemned the Iraq War, along with parties like Sinn Féin and the Green Party. And it's against monstrous weapons of mass destruction, which, when you think about it, in the hypocritical political culture we have, we can go around the world and pointing fingers at other nations, and yet we haven't. It's actions and deeds that define the SNP, that it's a party willing to, live up to its name. And I think minorities have started thinking, well, you know what, they're not the way they're portraying it as this, great giant coming down from hell, to destroy us. And that image has now eroded completely. And I think that's the biggest change in Dundee. Dundee's got, I think, in like most areas, there's a lot of tribalism within ethnic communities, but most of the young minority ethnic, and irrespective if they're Hindu or Sikh or Muslim, they come and say, oh yeah, SNP, because they can identify with this progressive, vibrant movement. They can't identify with the Conservatives. I mean, not many can. I think you have to be over 50 to usually, and that's the usual, average age of the Tory party voter. So, and Labour Party, sorry?
I've been told it's 60.
Is it? Alright, okay, so I'll have to push that up. And the Labour Party, well, the problem is that it's more or less evaporated in Scotland. So when we see Mr Miliband, as we did the leaders' debate, we can't connect with that.
Do you feel then, obviously, because we have what's established now as a branch of the Labour Party, we have Scottish Labour. Do you feel that and the tact that they have at the moment, they can make inroads into reaching out to the electorate at all?
not at this late a day. It might be another 10 years that they can develop that capability, but they've literally decimated all those roads over. And I said Blair is a fundamental instrument in destroying what I would see as the Labour left. And what you're left with are those, as Moni and as Nighet said, as the advocates of unfettered free market neoliberal capitalism. They're no different from what we see on paper as someone as conservative or as Labour. In fact, why you'd want to vote Labour when you can vote Tory, because they're more or less exactly a shadow of each other. The austerity light, Mr. Ed Balls, or you can have full austerity, or you can take the pain full time, or you can take it over a long period. I don't see the difference. So they're I hate to quote Mr. Galloway, but they're two cheeks of the same backside, and so they are, and that's the problem. And ordinary people now realise that, whether you're black, you're white, you're Asian, they realise that the established parties are part of the problem, not part of the solution.
I mean, I think what they're, just to add what to Sohail's saying, is that what they're actively doing, and which is something that I, had to get involved against, is they're dismantling the best of British life. They're as I said, I'm a social democrat. I believe in strong public services. When you lift people out of poverty, you create a better society. So whereas the SNP want to protect public services like the NHS, we're seeing it being dismantled in England. And ironically, I think that we're the ones who are basically trying to protect traditional British values. The Scottish nationalists are trying to protect traditional British values. What our parents and grandparents grew up with in this country.
There was a point came in there I took a note on about when you mentioned the Conservatives trailer that was going round the Go Home, etc. as well. Do you feel that Labour have moved so far that they can actually genuinely compete down south for the UKIP vote? Traditionally, when you come to the nearer polling day, the smaller, more minority parties, etc., might see their vote tail off. And do you think that's realistic, that UKIP vote that Labour have as good a shout at pulling some of that UKIP vote as the Tories?
I don't know. I don't think that Labour, personally, are aiming for the UKIP vote. We know that UKIP have essentially absorbed the BNP membership, and that's it. Mr. Griffin is like kaput, and as a result, anything from the kind of the post kind of EDL has been folded into UKIP, despite what Mr. Farage would say. We know that's not true. Labour's not really going for that vote at all. What it's going for is the kind of the upper middle class that could vote Tory, that could vote Liberal, and it could vote Labour as well. So the swing voters, because the way I see it is that people who vote Tory, and it's the case in Scotland, people who voted Tory in Scotland have voted Tory for the last 50 or 40 years, and they'll never change. And they say that there are a certain age demographic in Scotland as well. I would say that soundbite would be the same in England, but there is a block voters, a swing between Tory, between Labour. I think that's what Labour really is heading for.
I think that comes back to what you mentioned about the Observer front page, with Miliband, it's reaching out to what he called moderate Tories.
Moderate Tories,
yeah.
It's very much aping that same kind of language to get to those voters, the same kind of policies that, it is against, we need to preserve our British values, but nobody wants to try and pin them down. Nobody seems to actually know what that means. They're getting taught in schools south of the border, and again, the same sort of arguments come up, what do they mean by British values? It's just how about just teaching honesty and decency and integrity and getting young people to talk about using common sense frameworks? They work just as well. And if you look at religions, they use the same kind of moral and ethical frameworks. It's just very interesting. When we talk about ethoses, what do they actually mean when you unpack them?
Sohail's point there a minute ago about the Conservatives being a Conservative vote, and that is it. Where do you feel that leaves the political voting that we're hearing more and more about in the run into May, where we have specific seats where voters of a certain party might be asked to vote for another party. And so how do you feel on the tactical voting front?
I think there's scope for a lot of confusion there.
There is.
I think that what Sohail said is correct, is that you'll get a lot of Tory voters who are, actually, to their credit, they're principled.
Yeah.
They believe in what the Tory party says and does, and they're not going to lend their vote. I suspect you may get people who have voted Labour voting tactically before you'll get Tories voting tactically, because you'll be able to confirm this, but there seems to be a rampant hatred of the SNP that blinds them.
That's not a new thing. I think that's been there for a while. No, I think you're right. I just read this recently that there is rumours that Labour members or Labour voters will be asked to vote for people they wouldn't normally vote for, purely to keep out those north of Hadrian's Wall that are coming down to change everything. But yeah, the Tory voters have always been the same. In Scotland, the percentage of Tory votes always stayed the same. So it's always been the battles for the middle ground. It's quite interesting that the UKIP voters are looking for the same ground, but they're also looking for what I would call is the white working class vote, particularly south of the border. They've not made much inroads in Scotland.
I would sort of still be worried, because we discounted them last time for the European elections. We saw David Coburn really as a caricature of everything that we would never want to be part of Scotland, and then he won third place, which was a wake-up call to say that the people on the ground do want change. Why aren't we listening? Are there issues that need to be addressed? I don't. Perhaps those south of the border are one step ahead towards that kind of political posturing, using that same kind of language to get the voters that they think are on the fringes that might be gathered in. Maybe in Scotland we should start addressing the questions that caused 140,000 people in Scotland to vote David Coburn in. We do not want to let UKIP in through the back door, and that it could happen.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel, specific with a view to the sort of ethnic minorities in politics, do you feel the SNP have specifically set policy and tact to be more inclusive, or do you feel that it's a natural progression as a party dealing with societal issues that has then encapsulated and brought people together?
The second.
Yeah, I was
going to say definitely the second. With such an influx of new members, 75,000 new members, there has to be change, and it has to be progressive. And having a First Minister who is left-wing leaning, I think this naturally and organically just takes us down the route of being inclusive of all the people of Scotland, taking everyone's voice on board. And with the way that she has said repeatedly, when doing on a Thursday morning doing questions, it's like, if there are issues, come to me, we'll speak about them, and let's see what we can do to address the problems that are happening around us. I think that is an amazing sort of reaching out of the olive branch. It's just I want to do business with somebody like that, and we should learn lessons from that.
Okay.
Not much to add to that. I think Nighet just hit it on the nail on the head there. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the referendums played a huge part in bringing people together from all walks of life that you found that you'd never had a common interest with, and you found a couple of months later that you're actually best buddies? I think that's.
I think this is a good example here.
Yeah.
You're from Dundee. Yeah. I live in Edinburgh. Nighet lives in Glasgow. If it wasn't for the referendum, none of us would have met. And my social circle is basically based around my political activities now. Everyone I call up for a beer, it seems to be people I've met over the referendum. I was talking to a journalist last night actually about this from London about he can't believe what's the culture up here. The fact that, you know, people are politically awake. You know, that we're not just accepting everything we're told now. You know, as soon as something like one of these silly stories comes out in the media, people will get on their phone and start researching it. You know, there's that critical thinking has come back, which is, I think, is a bit of a problem for the Westminster elite. They don't like that.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to think.
Some other more specific, and then we'll come back to a general ideal and how we hope things will transpire. There's a lot of stuff at the moment being asked, if I'm honest, more so in hustings than necessarily on the door, regarding the issue of TTIP. So within TTIP, what are your feelings on this proposal as the limited bit that we know of it so far, and the implications that it might have for Scotland and where we should stand on it?
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree that the public services need to be protected from it. I mean, there may be a case for this trade deal. I'm not against it, you know, 100%. If it, you know, if it does good, if it creates jobs, if it perhaps means we rely less on financial services in this country, then perhaps that can be a good thing. However, I'm absolutely against public services, you know, being sucked in to this deal, you know, and mixed up along with it. I think that. So I think that the SNP's view is that the NHS should be protected from it. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely, but currently it isn't protected from it, which is deeply concerning. And which goes back to the point about, you know, being a big, strong believer in public services. And this is exactly the sort of thing that pushes people away from the Westminster parties, you know, when they do things like this, and you know, without really checking, you know, to see if is this what the population wants.
I mean, it requires 28 countries from the European Union to sign this agreement, but when all the parties that are involved in the negotiation of what the terms and conditions should be, and they're all agreeing very much the same thing, you know, what kind of say do we as the public have? I mean, it's again like with fracking. There was an outrage. I think 90% plus were against fracking, but licenses were sold to companies all over the country. I mean, like, is it Ineos? Or I don't know the.
I know who you mean.
Yes,
I don't know if
in Falkirk. You know, so it's like, how much can we as the public actually affect change? And again, we've been seeing the kind of selling out of public sector organisations. I would say it started in Labour's administration when they started selling contracts to private companies as sweeteners for funding, etc., with the NHS. We've seen that happen, and the Tories have just taken that further down the road. So again, you know, everything that we're concerned about in this trade agreement, it's already happening. It's just about putting that rubber stamp on it and making it legal and saying, oh, we're all in agreement about it. You know, but we seem to forget that. It's, you know, like in the welfare organisation, all these contracts to deliver programmes, they've been changed. Like during the Labour administration, it was called the Flexible New Deal. The whole programme was remodelled. Again, a continuation of what Labour had put in place is something called the work programme. And then the way it was, put down the supply chain, that was horrifying. Everybody took a cut. Every organisation took a cut of that. And these organisations are running across the world. What are all these main ones that do these health? I know all these names. I've done research on it and my mind has gone blank. G4 is one, and they do security. They do all this kind. It's just like these organisations are already in there, taking their cut of the pie, and people are left with like these exploitative 0-hour contracts, which are a fault, a direct fault, if you take it back to what Labour put in place during their administration.
Do you mean like the associated work programme, like A4E and Ingeus and these
Yes,
companies?
all these type of organisations. It's just like these are organisations that operate all over the world. They are not just, they're not a UK organisation or a Scottish. It's just like, that is how TTIP has already crept into British society, into Scottish society. When we talk about accountability, it's already so embedded. Where do we start? You know, clawing back what should be public sector jobs when they've already been outsourced as 0-hour contracts. That is what's caused all our problems today, when people don't have job security. It's a result of everything that's happened.
No, I think following up from what Nighet said, and Moni, it's, I think you're right. Not only is it just a continuation of what's said before, I think it's a rebranding of it. We call it privatisation, the Tories called it deregulation, and now it's called something else. And I think it's to take that stigma away from what ordinary people see is the sell-off of public services. The NHS is one of the largest employers in Scotland. Largest employer in Dundee, and what you're seeing is that what you're having before, it's just another way to rebrand it, to sell off, another way to put it through, and it's happening throughout Europe, the neoliberal project to sell off parts of it. So yeah, I'm opposed to it. I mean, I don't know if it will bring any benefits whatsoever. I don't have an issue if private contractors are brought in if the NHS is able to manage, but on a temporary basis. I'm completely opposed to completely being sold off and then in the hands of a private company that looks to a profit. But TTIP is just what's happening before. Started way back in '79, continued under various Labour governments, and now what we see now is the combination of that. It's happening in Europe, it's happening across the pond, post Reagan, and it's still continuing as we see. And the problem is that it's an ideological one. It's deeply rooted in conservative culture, is that we're here to finish the job, and the job is that we need to get rid of every public sector job. So it's in the hand of the very few, and that's it. And what I'm going to get said is the crux of it is that job security has been taken from people who have controlled these jobs, who are in charge of them, through trade unions, through government sectors, and being put in hands into boardrooms, into a minority few who will decide what they get paid, if they get hired, and that's it. And that's the key problem, and it's just another factor. It's deregulation or business as usual, as the way I see it.
And the funny thing is you described it as being deeply ideological. I could not agree more. I mean, especially when it comes to the NHS. I mean, there is a mountain of information and research. I think Alison Pollock in particular has done a lot of research on this, and since the PFI project of projects of Blair came in the mid-90s or late 90s, we now spend more as a percentage of our GDP on healthcare than when it was 100% public. I mean, there's so much information out there that it just proves that privatization has been a failure for healthcare, but it's because it's been pushed by this neoliberal ideology.
I mean, there are other routes there. The Scottish Government now runs the NPD, the not-for-profit development project that is taking us away from the PFI. But we're on TTIP. I think we're actually only just still scratching the surface here. There's so much underneath it. There's a big focus on the NHS and the protection thereof. But I mean, there are other measures in there where there's just no clarity on to do with food legislation, sustainability and production, and what there's big fears on workers' rights as well, because you're trying to standardise something, and where is it going to start from? Is it going to start from the worst point position that becomes the acceptable, or is everybody to suddenly aspire to what would be regarded as the highest point? And there are, for those who actively are campaigning completely against it, their findings are that there are some absolutely horrendous job loss possibilities out of it as well. So
yeah,
I think
corporations being able to sue governments if their profits are threatened. I mean,
the
that's
Philips case in
preposterous.
Malaysia, that's a big
absolutely
one.
preposterous. I mean,
Yeah,
madness.
I think what really scares me is the relaxing of food regulations. I think Neil mentioned that just a second ago. It's just like, what will actually be put in our foods? You know, when we look at the preservatives, the chemicals, how will that food be farmed, and what will it actually be edible when it comes to the point of for us to eat it? It's these kind of concerns that worry me, because it's creeping in at every single level. It's just not something that's out there. It affects the way we live, the way we shop, and the way we use our services. As a primary user, we need to take more responsibility. Adding on to that, it's just like we've just passed this through legislation of having free school meals for children from primary 1 to primary 3 in Scotland. This was introduced last year by the Liberal Democrats as part of the coalition in England. But what has been found, and it's being silenced, is that there is an element that the food is so over-processed that you could actually be serving them a McDonald's meal due to the nutritional quality of that food. So, you know, again, the profit margin has come into play, that, you know, where money can be saved, the best quality of food is not being served to the very population of children that they went in to make life better for. There's a lot of questions being opened up. I mean, I would like to think that we don't have catering organisations that will get contract for the children's in our Scottish schools. It's an opportunity for us to have social enterprises, get mothers together, group them together, and get them cooking and creating their own networks. You know, I don't want to go down the way of the rest of the UK, because this is our future of our children, and if we don't take responsibility now, we keep seeming to farm it out to all these other professionals and organisations, and then, you know, it might be too late for us to say, well, we want a say in this, because there's so much legislation already in place. It makes it very difficult for us as people on the grassroots level to cut through that bureaucracy.
No, they're very good points. One of the other key bits coming into this election is obviously the issue on austerity, how we deal with it, what options are out there for whether we stay within it. You mentioned austerity light, austerity max, no austerity or whatever. We're told also that the austerity measures have worked so far. So in opening out this bit of the conversation, do you think those austerity measures and where they've taken the economy to, the improvements, or alleged improvements, are tangible with ordinary working people? Do you think people feel the benefits of these austerity cuts as we are told they have worked?
Moni and I had this discussion just before you arrived, Neil, and we were both of the same thinking that if it's worked, it's not worked for the working class. It's probably worked for the corporations and everybody else that have increased their profits. But for the working class people, when we see, football fans taking in bags of groceries with food banks outside, like for example Celtic Football Club, it makes you think, what is happening here? So I don't think the austerity measures have worked, or if they have not filtered down to the people that need it the most.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I personally don't agree that the coalition's economic track record has been good, and that's backed up by some very credible economists. Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winning economist, he spoke out about this a couple of weeks ago, made it, I think, into at least the National. Wouldn't be surprised if it didn't make it anywhere else, where he pointed out since the coalition came to power, their economic track record has been actually extremely bad, and he blasted the media for being so easy on them for not taking them to task or challenging them, on their abysmal track record. And so the last 2 quarters aside, the record has not been good. The deficit is higher. The economy's been yo-yoing. There's nothing I can see to really be proud of there at all. We also know from other far better economists than George Osborne that, like Joseph Stiglitz, Bill Clinton's former economist, that he's made the point several times, including one of his books, that having good, strong public services leads to a better functioning, more stable economy. I mean, since the neoliberal experiment began, we've had constant, instead of slow, steady growth, what we've had is an economy that yo-yos up and down.
And every time we're told boom and bust can't carry on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's so, I don't accept that the coalition's record has been good. Not at all.
I think when they talk about economic recovery, we've turned a corner. I mean, if you look back how many times George Osborne's turned a corner, if you look at every time you turn a corner, you'll be realising we're actually going round on a circle. And that's the reality of it. Most of the economic boom or economic recovery hasn't really happened out with London. So that's the figures, and that's the biased figures that we see. Is as soon as you move beyond the great metropolitan areas of the UK, it's the same as before. And if you look at Scotland, with its highly high public sector jobs, and those public sectors that were basically axed, each public sector equates to a job in the private sector loss. So essentially, if you cut someone in the public sector, you're also cutting someone in the private sector. That's 2 jobs that go. So you can imagine the impact it has in Scotland. The jobs that have come in, we know have been, as mentioned by Nighet, is the temporary workers, the 0-hour contracts that the Osborne is now lauding as the great miracle recovery. People go in, they work for 2 months and they get laid off and they get hired back on. That's not work. That's being used when you feel like it. It's the culture, as the American culture, the hire 'em and fire 'em culture that's come over to the UK. So I wouldn't see that as a form of recovery, and that's why it's been lauded. As you said, it's not really. There's no recovery, and I don't see any recovery at all. I don't think austerity works. I never believed in the trickle down effect in the first place. I think that was sold a dead horse with that one. So it's the other way around. But for me, and certainly the Stiglitz approach with I'm pretty sure he's a Keynesian. He takes a Keynesian approach by putting in. You can't get people to recover, buy goods, and boost the economy when they've got no money. So it's a simple analogy. Is that you've got to spend, and I always use the analogy and compare it with today. Is go back to the post-Great War. You're talking a Britain that's literally decimated. Millions of British servicemen are dead. You've got Britain has literally been destroyed. Parts of London, parts of England, parts of Scotland, by Nazi bombardment. And what do you see a Labour government under Attlee? They nationalise, they spend like crazy, and they take a humane approach to that you have to invest into people, not corporations. And what happens, you go through the golden age, and it builds up.
It worked.
It worked, and definitely.
And that's the approach that he's taken, is that you put in, not take out.
I think part of the problem, I think when I mentioned that Krugman blasted the media, I think what he was getting at, if he didn't actually come out and say it, was the fact that it can be confusing for the ordinary person, because what's happened is there's been this sense of urgency around the deficit that's been created, that we have to pay this off yesterday or else the world will come to an end. There's this climate of panic that if we don't get this paid off when George Osborne says we do, that something bad will happen, and nothing bad is going to happen. All countries have a run of debt. It's not an abnormal situation.
The debt post World War II was
enormous
compared to the GDP. I mean, and the people in the Labour government at the time didn't look at that. They looked at the needs of people, and they were bold enough to say, we don't care. we're going to focus on what we feel is best. And that's the issue here, is that back to this ideological, it's almost zealous attitude of the Conservatives, is that they want to finish what started in 79, and they'll use every month, every year to chip away at that at whatever the cost. And as I say, there's no timeline. We can spread this over 50 years if we wanted to. I think we just paid off the debt from World War II to the US under the Marshall Plan. Why not spend another 50 years dealing with this? There's no issue, there's no rush, because I think the long-term approach builds up communities, and it encourages, I think, a sense of confidence. I don't personally see austerity working at all, and in fact, I think it's going to cause more resentment, and you might have to quote me on this, a bit of a Russian-style revolution, against the elite, and we're seeing that in Scotland. And say that I don't think we've had a revolution in Scotland. I think we've had a velvet revolution in Scotland now, and people in Scotland are now so hungry now for politics. You give them something, and they want to know everything about it. That's the political elite in Westminster despise that. They don't.
What's interesting is that during the leaders' debates, Nicola Sturgeon, very openly and plainly spoke out against austerity. After that, her popularity in England went through the roof.
Yeah.
There is. A lot of people recognise that what she's saying makes sense. Real term increases in public spending makes more sense.
There is there's a lot of credibility behind her speaking about an asset-based model. We can, like Sohail's just said, that we can carry on paying off our debts, but at a slower rate. But we need to start investing in our people, because we've seen over the last 5 years what the results are of a model that's gone incredibly wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're nearly sort of coming towards the end of our time here. There's more background noise here. It's a busy cafe, this, the Yes Hub, and there's actually a folk music jam comes in here in the Sunday afternoon after us. But what I'd like to just close on is a question for you all. What do you hope for Scotland from the outcome of this election?
Well, as an SNP member, I want us to take as many seats as possible. Will that happen? I don't know, but if we can get as many as possible, then we'll have a voice at the Parliament that we were told that by the Unionists they wanted us to be a part of.
Yeah.
So hopefully, the overall aim being that we can do better by the people of Scotland.
I concur exactly with Moni. I can't wait for us to get as many seats as possible. I want to do exactly the same thing that the Unionists did when they marched 100 MPs down the middle of Glasgow's Sauchiehall Street. I want to do the same as we walk into Westminster. All 59 seats if possible. Thank you very much.
I think for me, being the non-SNP member here, for me it's I quote Tommy Sheridan, and I think I'm going to vote with my head, and I'll vote my heart next time around. And I think it's a rational vote, and anyone who isn't of any other political persuasion needs to look at this vote as a way of extending our interests into Westminster. We've been lied to. We've been completely led astray with a vote. We've got nothing. So at least we can take the democratic approach to extend our interest into Westminster. It's our right, and I feel that certainly the SNP is in the position. It might not always be in the position. It might be another party, but certainly today, certainly tomorrow, and certainly on May the 7th, it is the only party that can challenge that, the consensus, this the stubborn consensus of Westminster, and put our interests and the interests of Scotland forward. And that's why I'm going to vote for the SNP. And it'll be quite an interesting, many of the issues, like the House of Lords, the decrepit, undemocratic, the monarchy, and of course the foreign policy, which is close to my heart. I think these issues will be well represented by the SNP. I know they will, because they've been there for a long time. And I think it's going to be good on the 7th, certainly looking forward to that as a non-member.
Also, there's been just such a paucity of positive vision from the unionists. Every time one of them opens their mouth, it's just to slag off.
Yeah, and we get thousands of new members. Let them keep going. I think also that it's just so important that we all have a voice, and we're saying this, and it's just like the press's reaction to the SNP is just like the total fear. I'm loving it, because I'm just thinking, to have our leader, being described as the most dangerous woman in the UK, it's just like, amazing. Why are you thinking in such a way? We're bringing about a positive change. Where is the fear coming from? I mean, what is so wrong with wanting a vision of hope to do things differently?
I think that the SNP have set forth unleashed other progressive parties to put forward. I don't think the SNP will be the only ones to galvanise from what's happening. I think Natalie Bennett and Leanne Woods are going to be trailing that as well. So I think you're going to be more than a handful of MPs, and there are going to be a lot of MPs in Westminster, and it won't be just the fringes of the Labour Party that all be confined to the back benches. They'll now able to shout boo at the Conservatives and the Liberals. I think there'll be a lot more people shouting boo now.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I do hope is that this does inspire Wales to get behind Plaid Cymru a bit more, because Leanne's been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. A brilliant role model on so many different levels, but especially for women and gender equality. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. I can genuinely say I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'd like to commit and say I'll come back and do it again ahead of Holyrood.
Oh, definitely.
Next year.
Thank you.
If not before, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.